Hey, how are my people? Hope you guys are having a good weekend. I have an email here that was not intended to be read as an encounter. It's the man sending me an idea for a story and doing some research. And I may do that if I can find the time, but I thought the email was so good, I thought I would share that with you before we get into the meat of the video here. I was born and raised in Alabama, right on the Gulf Coast, but I spent most of my time in Mississippi because the state line was just a mile away. Like I said, I grew up in Alabama, but my folks sent me to Mississippi to play football in high school, and then on to scuba, where I played at East Mississippi Community College. I'm gonna stop here. You guys, that's a fairly infamous school down there in scuba. Matter of fact, HBO did a long series documentary on 2, maybe 3 seasons that East Mississippi had. And they had a character of a coach. I don't know if he's still there or not, but anyway, it's a good documentary if you want to look it up. He goes on to write, you may have heard that once you get to scuba, which was in the backwoods to me, one of the first things you're told about was the scuba hairy man. On 2 different occasions, late in the evening during football practice, myself and a few teammates saw the scuba hairy man with our own eyes. He must have been 9 feet tall, and you have to keep in mind, I was playing with guys that were up to 6'6" tall, and what we saw watching us during the practice was at least 2 feet taller than any player on our team. He writes, I'd love to hear you put together a story about the scuba hairy man and how he stalked us at practice. In all honesty, that really did happen, and many of the players at practice would stay on the practice field, which was by the woods, rather than take a break on what we would have called the sidelines, because many were afraid you'd get snatched by the hairy man. Keep up the good stories, Cam. We love them. I can just see these giant offensive linemen, and the coach gets on them. If any of y'all ever play football, you know the coaches aren't usually real nice to you. They'll tell you, you're stinking up my field. Get off my field. They'll send you to the sidelines, and these guys will be going, oh, no, coach, I'll just stand over here, coach, because they don't want to get snatched up by the hairy man. Oh, it's a great email, and I just wanted to share it to you. Okay, we've got a couple of stories here I want to share with you, and I'm ready to get rocking and rolling. All right, here we go. This story is sent by David. I haven't been watching your channel for too long, but I've come to enjoy it a lot. I've only had one... Wait a minute. Why haven't you been watching my channel very long, David? I hope you're going back and catching up, brother. Just kidding with you. I've only had one physical encounter, but it sparked a lifelong curiosity and fascination about Sasquatch. A little background for the encounter. This took place just outside the small town of Catawba, North Carolina in September of 1990, where I lived with my 3 siblings and my 68-year-old foster mother, Doris. I was the oldest child, being 9, with my sisters being 8 and 5, and my brother was only 6 months old. We lived in a single-wide trailer that was almost completely surrounded by woods, and were connected to civilization by a rarely used dirt road. When I say completely surrounded, behind us was woods, to our right was woods with a gully that ran 30 to 40 feet deep, and across the dirt road was more woods. The only non-wooded area was to our left, where there was a strip of trees with 2 fields just past them, which ironically enough were surrounded by woods. Seeing as how Doris only allowed us to watch nature, Nova, and the Smothers Brothers, we spent almost all of our free time playing and exploring outside. I was used to most of the sights, sounds, and smells that surrounded us outside, but a few did throw me off. Almost daily I heard whoops and hollers that sounded just like howler monkeys or Siamangs. I had recently watched a Nature or Nova episode devoted to these monkeys, which I didn't think was right because none of those lived in the United States. Those calls always came from either behind our trailer or to the right of it, usually from a pretty decent distance. The woods behind the house was one of the few areas I never extensively explored. Every time I stepped into the tree line, I got this overwhelming feeling that something didn't want me there. I didn't feel scared so much as sternly warned. However, on one occasion, I made it about 20 feet into the trees before getting that feeling that before I turned around, I noticed 3 or 4 decent-sized saplings about 10 or 12 feet tall bent over and worked into one another as if someone had tried to make a crude shelter. I finally got the hint and left those woods and never went back in. And on maybe 3 or 4 more occasions, I remember waking up in the middle of the night to the overwhelming odor of what smelled like a wet dog wafting through my partially open window. It was summer and Doris was trying to save money by opening windows versus using the air conditioner. It would only last a few moments before the smell seemed to dissipate. Whenever I would experience any of this, I just kind of brushed it off. I was going through a lot at the time in foster care and trying my best to make sure my siblings were taken care of. My mother made me a promise to look after them, so I didn't think too much about anything else. I had never heard of anything in my young life about Bigfoot, so I just assumed that the noises were from birds that I had never learned the names of. The smells were from animals pooping close to the house or my brother's diaper, and that the whole woods behind the trailer ordeal was me being a scaredy cat. All of that changed in late September of 1990. We were off from school for a teacher work day, and we had decided that we were going to go about a quarter of a mile down the road and try our hand at climbing this clay embankment that was especially challenging. Doris wasn't fond of the mess we would make of ourselves, but since we were wearing our well-worn play clothes, she let us go. So I went with my 2 sisters down to the clay embankment, and when I got there, I stopped. When my oldest sister asked me what was wrong, I pointed to the 2 bare footprints that led up the embankment. They were about 13 inches long and about 5 inches wide. The only reason I remember this is because we had just finished working on this art project in school, and I had made it a point to measure my hand. Thumb tip to the tip of my middle finger was 5 inches. I was confused, first of all, by the fact that someone had seemed to climb this really steep embankment barefoot, and secondly, by the fact that they had apparently had done it in 2 steps. I looked up the embankment and tried to figure out which way it had gone. I looked left and saw nothing unusual, but when I looked right, I saw something that boggled my mind. About 75 yards away, I saw what looked like a weird, oversized gorilla walking on 2 legs across the road. It had taken 1 step into the middle of the road, and as it went to take the second step, it turned at the hips and looked at us. It didn't slow down or make a sound. The second step put it on the other side of the road, and then it descended down into the gully. The entire encounter, from my discovery of the footprints to the creature disappearing from view, lasted maybe 15 seconds. After that, I made my sisters run back to the trailer, and I was right behind them. I told Doris about it, but she laughed at me and said I had a really great imagination. I didn't learn anything about what Bigfoot was, not even the name, until we went to our local library a few weeks later, and I saw a book with a Bigfoot face on the cover. I knew instantly that that was what I had seen, and since then I have spent the next 29 years researching and listening to other people's encounters. That is a great story. It's not an in-your-face type crazy action-packed encounter, but it is your classic encounter with kids exploring the woods and running up on a Bigfoot. And David had the sense about him to look at these footprints, remember the distance between his thumb and his finger, to lay it up against the footprints and get a measurement. Of course, it's a bank, and I'm assuming the Bigfoot is going up the bank, so he's not leaving a perfect track, but still, he gets an idea of what it is. Then to look over to his right and see it crossing the road. Those are images I'm sure are seared in your mind. And I just want to say this, David. Good for you for looking after your brothers and sisters while you were in foster care. I have a real special place in my heart for you kids, and I just love you. And it sounds like everything has turned out okay, and I'm real proud for you. So thank you for taking the time to send that story in, buddy. I really appreciate it. Here's a story from the Pacific Northwest. I think it's really good. The writer says, I made a friend here in Oregon, a local that was born and raised in the areas between Grants Pass and Roseburg. His father was a gold prospector and he had learned the trade. Not long after I met my friend, his father passed and the mining claim sat empty. I will not mention the claim as non-locals don't have any business with it. But to any that know, there was a converted school bus down there that was used to live in. In my third year, my buddy talked me into staying down on the mining claim with him after the rainy season to do some dredging. I had a big American pit bull with me that loved the water and kept us alerted to any critters coming into camp. We stayed in the bus, worked for a couple of weeks with no problems, but soon after is when everything started. At night, my dog would go nuts, barking fiercely toward the water. No matter what I did or said, he would not stop until early in the morning. Time after time, I would go out with my flashlight and my shotgun looking for what he was barking at, but nothing was ever there. I figured the increased currents were making noise and never thought much of it. This went on for weeks. During the day, we had the dredge running, and it was quite loud. Nothing could really be heard, but there were times where I was always thought I saw something in my peripheral vision. I always just thought it was a small animal or dog as we let him run loose during the day. Then the pings on top of the bus started at night. I believed them to be sticks or clusters of pine needles falling. There was one night when my buddy was visiting his mom and the dog was doing his usual barking, but he stopped abruptly and I heard him go under the bus whimpering. My first thought were that a porcupine or snake had got him, and I went out with a flashlight to see what was going on. While I was bent down with one hand on the rear tires trying to get him to come out, I could see clearly that he was scared, not injured. I had never seen him scared of anything, not even a full-grown black bear. Out of nowhere, a rock hit the side of the bus and fell close to me. I was shocked. I stood very still and listened until not long after when another rock hit the side of the bus right next to me and startled the crap out of me. I made a dead run to the front door of the bus and locked myself inside with my shotgun in hand. I stood motionless in the middle of the bus, peering into the darkness, listening to my heart pounding in my ears. I waited for hours, but nothing else happened. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because my buddy woke me up and I was still sitting upright with the shotgun in my hands. I told him what had happened and he laughed at me, teasing me about the boogeyman trying to get me. I didn't find it funny, but I shook it off. I walked all over the mining claim looking for footprints or signs of intruders, but I found nothing. 2 nights later, we worked until almost dark and got in a late supper on the campfire. As we were sitting outside after dinner, the dog started to bark and growl into the darkness toward the stream, so I went and got my shotgun again. We sat there drinking for an hour or two before he heard the distinct sound of rocks hitting the ground behind us. Maybe it was because I had some liquid courage, or maybe I was just tired of dealing with the strangeness. Either way, I stood up and yelled toward the water, and I shot off 2 rounds of buckshot in the direction. The rocks stopped and all went quiet. We finally settled down for the night after putting away the food and dishes. I woke up in the middle of the night to a jolt and I wasn't sure why. I turned over and started to go back to sleep when the bus suddenly rocked from one side to the other. I quickly woke up my buddy and told him that we were not alone. He grumbled at me and started snoring again. I sat upright in total darkness, trying to adjust my eyes to see anything. The bus rocked hard to one side again as items fell from the pantry and hit the floor. We were both wide awake now. I found a flashlight and looked around out the windows to try to see what was going on. I walked up and down the area of the bus looking out the windows until I went from the right side to the back and shuddered so hard I dropped the flashlight. I fumbled around until I picked it up and shined it toward the emergency back exit door. My mind could not comprehend what I was seeing. The creature was covered with gray and white hair, about 4 to 6 inches long, with a few darker spots that almost looked like old wounds. His chest was clearly visible above the exit lever of the back door, and his massive arms and shoulders were wider than the back window, since I couldn't see all of him. I could clearly see his face looking sternly back at me. This was an intelligent creature, thinking of its next move. Large black eyes were watching my every move. I stood there for what seemed like hours, frozen with fear, staring in the creature's direction. I watched him shift slightly from side to side, like he was swaying from his left foot over to his right. He showed no fear whatsoever that I could tell. He had very human-like features, but in a different proportion than normal humans. He had a very large face, exposed slightly around the mouth, nose, and eyes, with very distinct eyebrows. His large, squarish teeth were yellowed and stained, like those of a wild boar. I don't remember him ever blinking once. It was really unnerving. He let out a high-pitched yell that could have broken the glass, like two metal pipes dragging against each other. We panicked and pointed our guns at him. When we did, he lifted the back of the bus off the ground and dropped it quickly. I knew then and there that we were going to die. This massive creature was going to rip this bus apart, and it was all over. He lifted the bus again and dropped it. This wasn't just shock and spring travel. It was like when you're driving too fast on a dirt road and hit a bridge. You could feel the tires impact and then the absorption of the springs. But just as soon as it all started, it was over. He walked off into the darkness and he disappeared. I fell to my knees, gasping, trying to catch my breath. My chest hurt so bad. I don't know if I even remembered to breathe throughout the whole interaction. I finally got my bearings together and waited until first light and got myself out of there. I never went back to that mining claim after dark, and I never will. He was making it damn clear that he didn't want us there, and I'm not going to try. Okay, and he ends the email with how much he likes the channel and all. So the man wanted to stay anonymous, and that's fine. And that's Oregon. Oregon is full of Bigfoots. Some people say the Pacific Northwest Bigfoots are nice, but this one sure wouldn't. He wasn't nice at all. Looked like he wasn't trying to get in the bus to get these guys out, but he was letting them know that I'm the boss of the woods. Don't point those guns at me. So, sir, it's a great story. I appreciate you sending it in. We all enjoyed it. All right, I think that's going to wind it up for today. Thanks for watching, and I really appreciate you. We will see you on the next series of stories. Thanks a lot.